rongoāwhare, which can be translated as house peace. And this is when truces between previously warring tribes could be negotiated by wāhine, high-ranking woman chiefs, to bring a permanent peace. And this reflects the beliefs that peace, when secured by men, could be seen as futile and not at all long-standing, able to be broken, I suppose, on a whim. But peace that was secured by women was seen as a forever peace, a long-standing, unbreakable truth.
Aloha and welcome to Cooper Union, what's happening with human rights around our world. And I'm so honored to be joined today by an amazing activist who is a scholar and also very much an artist that is able to blend spoken word with social justice commentary and a dedication to self-determination for her people. And it's going to be an exciting time together today as we look and speak with the Indigenous peoples of New Zealand, the Māori people of Aotearoa, land of the long white cloud, or land of the wrong white cloud, depending on your perspective, will be here today to share with us some of the important aspects of recent civil disobedience, of standing up for justice and basic rights from the Treaty of Waitangi, as well as into the current parliament, but also in a way sharing the rich cultural heritage and showing how the moral philosophy of the Maori people has existed for centuries. Haley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, pai maere kia koutou and e mihi ana kia koe e taku whanaunga. I acknowledge you, my kin, Joshua, and greetings to us all.
Thank you so much for coming and participating. I know your ancestors are the Ngāti Tipa, people from the Waikato-Tainui Māori Tribunal Confederation of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Can you let us know a little bit about your sacred homeland to those that aren't as familiar with Aotearoa?
Oh, sure thing, yeah. Okay, so we introduce ourselves by recalling and reciting our connection to the geographical features around us, such as our mountains and our rivers, which have nourished and sustained our communities and our ancestors for generations. So it's called a pepeha, and so I'll recite my pepeha for y'all, and that's how we introduce ourselves. Ka whai. Pai maere kia tātou, he uri ahau no Waikato-Tainui wharau, ko taupiri te maunga, ko Waikato te aua, ko Ngāti Sipa te hapu, ko Tauranga Nui te marae, ko kukutai ko karaka ngōku whānau, ko Haley kukutai woka tōku ingoa, e mihi ana, e mihi ana, e mihi ana. And that means I am a child of the Ngāti Sipa peoples from the Waikato-Tainui Māori Tribal Confederation. Waikato was the name of my ancestral river. Ngāti Sipa is my hapu or sub-tribe. Tauranga Nui is the name of my beautifully ornate carved meeting house. And I am from the karaka and the kukutai families. And I greet you all. I come from a beautiful, beautiful rohe or tribal area where it's not that far from where the river meets the sea. And our area is called Te Puahau Waikato, or the river mouth of Waikato. And my marae, Tauranga Nui, is where my great-grandmother birthed and raised my grandmother, Rangirara, and where she had her gardens, and it still is a very, very important place for myself and for our extended family, where we meet. It's like, a very important historical community gathering place where we hold our meetings and tangihanga funerals and important rituals.
And here in Hawaii, I know muliwai is so important, and that's where the fresh water and the salt water meet. There's always such a rich abundance of natural sea life as well in that space. So it must be a beautiful place to live with so much natural flora and fauna in one place.
It is, yes. And my great-grandmother was such a renowned fisherwoman as well. And within our marae and the banks of our ancestral river are some very, very special taonga species of fish like tuna, longfin eels, which are very endangered, and matamata, or whitebait, which is known as white gold. My great-grandmother, in order to help build Tūranga Waiwai, which is the center of the kingitanga, the Māori king movement, the Māori monarchy, and to provide, I suppose, a place for all of us to stand in resisting colonialism within our iwi. She did what was called ngā moni ika, which is where she would sell the fish that she caught, and whitebait was very expensive and very loved, and all of that money that she would make would go to building Tūranga Waiwai, which is really cool. And she was also in Te Pauamanga Tāwhiri, which is like this incredibly iconic kapahaka or traditional Māori performing arts group that Princess Te Puea Herangi set up as well to help those fundraising efforts. It was also like coinciding with the anti-war movement because of my tribe having our kingitanga or our Māori monarchy, and the establishment of our kingitanga as a way to directly oppose Queen Victoria and the unauthorized confiscation and stealing of over 1.2 million acres of our tribal ancestral land, then there was very much like a movement for us not to conscript to fight the white man's war, a battle that wasn't ours. So yes, I'm very thrilled that my great-grandmother, through her efforts, whether it be performing in Te Pauamanga Tāwhiri or in fishing, the bounty of river and sea creatures that were available, she really aligned with that movement and supported our continued resistance, which is what I'm inspired by to this very day and always, really.
We can definitely see you dancing in defiance in the footsteps of your great-grandmother in the greatest way. And maybe you could share with us a bit, what are some of the most imminent issues facing Maori youth today?
I mean, the main issue, I suppose, the overarching issue is the threats to our, Indigenous Māori human rights under the current coalition government that remains in our country. And this affects, our health and our well-being in so many ways because of the fact that they're going after, the aspects of our culture, which are our Māori identity, like our language, for example, te reo rangatira. Our language is inextricably connected to who we are because, of course, without our language, we cannot practice our rituals, cannot, pray our prayers, sing our songs, recite our whakapapa, our lineage. And so the biggest threat at the moment in terms of language is that the government has an English first policy. They've removed our Māori language from our early reader children's school books, leaving only Māori character names, which is appalling. And they're removing education around language from the elementary school curriculum as well. And then in terms of as if that doesn't already violate our, of course, Indigenous human rights, the founding document called Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi, which really provides the, almost like UNDRIP, like the very minimum basic human rights in the framework, which was that we maintain our own self-governance and sovereignty, over our lands, our language, our resources. They are trying to pretty much remove those clauses from, over 19 pieces of legislation, and taking it down to barely more than a consulting requirement, which means that, yes, we're facing some of the worst violations in decades, which undoubtedly affects our youths because of whether it's like them being able to see their own language in school and learn in school, or whether it be just, again, existing as Māori. It is a very intense and heavy time, and so there is a huge movement to try and vote this government out, and also ensure the entrenching of Te Tiriti o Waitangi into law to protect us for further generations, lest the next government come in that is super right wing and just take it a step further. So I would say those are the main things.
No, we appreciate that so much, because we remember here, and people don't hear enough about what's going on in Aotearoa, because the shadow from the White House is so big. But when we saw what was happening the year before, we began to look at what was happening with your right-wing government to see how we'd respond at the local level and sort of a municipal multilateralism, and seeing how at that time you had the first female Maori mayor of Wellington, to connect with her and see how she was organizing. But it's so true, as you talked about, the Treaty of Waitangi and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples are really the floor. They're the basic bottom that we can't go below. But as you described, it was so inspiring for us that we went and followed the march that was happening, and also the actions inside Parliament. Could you give us a little bit insight of the resistance that was happening there during that time with the march and all the actions, to be able to really show how the people of Aotearoa stood in solidarity with the Maori, understanding that the government is heading in the wrong direction and definitely going against sacred aspects that have been long seen as the core of how to move forward in a culture of compassion, at least living with one another.
Kia ora. Yes, that was such an incredibly powerful and notable moment in our history. For sure, I think it was just this overwhelming understanding that, once again, what is good for Māori is good for all, and how we measure, obviously, our success and our well-being as a nation and as a community by, how our most vulnerable populations are doing. And so, of course, for us as the Indigenous peoples of Aotearoa, tangata whenua, peoples of the land, ensuring that our human rights are honored is something that was very moving to see embraced, acknowledged, and supported by our tangata tiriti, or treaty partners. It was really, really cool. The Toitū Te Tiriti march was pretty much the biggest that we've ever had in our history, and I feel like it just reached everywhere internationally, because there was also when we were really experiencing some huge attacks upon our kanohi kitea, our faces, our front-facing Māori relatives in parliament, and the vitriol that was obviously put upon our peoples for, yet again, being Māori, like Rawiri Waititi with his lack of a tie, but he had his taonga, of course, being, taken out of the chambers, and then Hana Rāwhiti Maipi Clark, her incredibly powerful haka and demonstration. And yeah, I think we're still feeling the effects of that. I feel like it was the most incredible moment where, obviously, for hundreds of years, we have been, standing strong, pushing back against this government and the Crown and their policies and these new waves of settler colonialism. And this time, it felt like it almost played out on the world stage, thanks to social media, and so the burden kind of felt really shared, and it was just really a powerful moment where I felt like it reached Indigenous folks, putanoa i te ao, throughout the world, and it was just a really fabulous awakening, I think, for our country and our nation, that at least in the last 40 years or so, we have not seen this much undoing of policies and of Indigenous human rights. And so it has kind of felt like, when we rise up, our comrades and treaty partners who do want to be on the right side of history are standing with us. And so, yes, I do feel like we're still feeling those repercussions now, because people are so aware of the incessant breaches by this government and continued breaches. And so I just feel like we feel a global sense of solidarity in our work and our push for better for our communities and for our next 7 generations. And that's definitely what I felt after, seeing the responses to even my interventions at the Permanent Forum. It was really powerful and profound. Like, we do it obviously for our people, and, for our ancestors and for our generations to come, but also understanding that, yet again, this is what we're doing is also for the betterment of our Indigenous relatives throughout the world who maybe don't have the same privileges and freedoms, despite the awful breaches to our human rights. There's still that responsibility that I feel that's really upon us, whether in our Toitū Te Tiriti movement or, on the international stage, like at the UN, where we feel like as Māori, we just need to, it is like our ancestral responsibility for our people, but for others who maybe don't have the same types of freedoms, to be able to speak out to that extent against their governments. That's kind of how I feel, I guess, and what really informs my practice and work, is trying to do it for our people, but also to push the limit even more so. And that doesn't mean that it's easy at all. It's still, is very difficult and sometimes very toimaha, very, very heavy. But I acknowledge that, like we were speaking about just before, within those mechanisms like the forum, there are, so many peoples and communities who are living in such dangerous circumstances that they just can't say what they need to be able to say for fear of reprisals or being disappeared even.
It's true, and it's heavy, but the way that you delivered it and the actions that were inspired by Maori people really did, in a way, it sent off a ripple. The march really rippled across Moana Nui Akea, and the haka for human rights really resonated with all Indigenous peoples around the entire planet. And that really gets me back to the footsteps of your great-grandmother, Mite Karaka Kukutai. She was doing amazing work as well in advocating for tino Aotearoa, which is, of course, is self-determination guiding by the Māori feminist epistemologies and leadership practices. Can you share what you're doing in Aotearoa to keep that flame for feminism and Indigenism burning brightly for a better future?
Sure, yes. Okay, well, I should start off by speaking about my great-grandmother and, of course, what she was known for, and therefore how that informs me and my work. She famously refused to speak reo Pākehā, refused to speak English, refused to speak to English, so she was very staunch in that regard. And again, that's so rings true today with the fact that I was saying just before, you know, that how intertwined our Māori language is with our spirituality, with our rituals, with our cosmologies. And so, yes, she was very famous for her heartiness, if I could say it like that. And she was a tariao wāhine, or a high priestess of our kingitanga-specific religion, tariao, which means the morning star, and it's like a offshoot of Pai Mārire, which is a religion of peaceful resistance, meaning goodness and peace. And this is the religion that we've observed since, I think, about 1858, under our second Māori king, Tāwhiao Toitū Te Tiriti, and really armed our survivants against the many losses of lives and land that we faced in the raupatu in the time of the confiscation. Nani Mite was the lady in waiting to our first Māori queen, Te Aotearoa Kahu, and so she was at her side really until she died, and traveled to Hawaii to you know, our relatives exactly where you are, and taught haka, or our traditional performing arts. She was just, yeah, truly a force. Her most well-known composition is called Kiwi Weka, and it's somewhat of an anti-war song. And that was written in the 40s, and it's still sung today. I'm very, very proud of that beautiful composition of hers. And she's featured in many a documentary. Even her portrait is in the Waikato Museum, the museum in my community as well. I absolutely love the many stories that I receive about my great-grandmother. And so I feel like the way that I enact, you know, her values and her strength is pretty much in everything that I do, whether it be creative and through my music, which is definitely unashamedly mana wāhine, you know, grounded in our traditional and ancient belief in the spiritual power and authority of women. In, I suppose, my absolute pride and ngāko whiwhita, or heart that is ablaze for my language, and yeah, and really my fearlessness to try as much as I can and ngawa te kaki o te kāwanatanga, and gnaw at the neck of the government to fight for better, for our human rights, for our language, for our betterment, and for our protections. And even in academia, I'm currently doing my master's in Indigenous Studies at the University of Auckland, Waipapa Taumatarau. And it's such a joy and a real honor to be able to dive even more into those, you know, Indigenous and Māori feminist epistemologies within my research and projects. So yes, my great-grandmother well and truly lives on as a legend and as, the lifeblood really of my community and my tribe and myself. I'm very, very proud of her and lean on her mahi, her work, and who she was very much.
And it really inspires me to think of two amazing royals in Hawaii. Queen Liliuokalani, also composer, fearless as well in all of her work, but also another one, Princess Ruth Ke'elikolani, who isn't known enough, but she famously refused to speak English. And she understood English perfectly, but refused to speak it, and choosing instead to converse exclusively in Olelo, Hawaii as a form of cultural resistance. So you can definitely see how between the two islands here of Polynesia, the common aspects of how we can come together. And you described a little bit about some of your work in academia. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about some of the writing that you're doing on traditional Maori peace-building practices centering mana wāhine, our belief in the inherent spiritual power and authority of women, and maybe describe that a bit, because Indigenous peace-building is absolutely important as we look at going forward. And if you could share some of the main findings or the core of the philosophy and its significance today in the world that we find ourselves in.
Oh, sure thing. Yes, absolutely. So I find, and not surprisingly, of course, that much of the research that's, done in general, I guess, often focuses on males and doesn't necessarily highlight or portray how our society, traditional Māori society, was really governed and run by wāhine and by mana wāhine, of course, the belief in the power of women, and with us and our ancestors successfully upholding our rangatiratanga or governance of our society for upwards of 27 generations before Victorian values fully took hold upon our colonization. So when I was invited by Bina to contribute a chapter in a book that she is putting together about traditional peace-building practices in Indigenous communities, I was so excited to try and really dive deeply into practices that specifically centered and were orchestrated and run by women. And so that's what I've done in this article. And so there's so many incredible customs that we have. And I decided to focus on 5 of them. And so I'll tell you a little bit about them.
Sure.
So the first one is called muru, which literally means to wipe away. This is like a ceremonial form of ritualized plundering as compensation. And there were muru plundering parties that were known to be completely operated by wāhine and featuring only wāhine, only women. And the second one is rongoāwhare, which can be translated as house peace. And this is when truces between previously warring tribes could be negotiated by wāhine, high-ranking woman chiefs, to bring a permanent peace. And this reflects the beliefs that peace, when secured by men, could be seen as futile and not at all long-standing, able to be broken, I suppose, on a whim. But peace that was secured by women was seen as a forever peace, a long-standing, unbreakable truth. So I just loved that. I think that's so beautiful and really does speak to that authority and spiritual power that our women possess. The next type of peace building is called tatau pounamu. If folks do not know, pounamu is these beautiful types of greenstone. And, you know, previous to colonization, these were, pounamu was seen as like the strongest, most durable, most prized, you know, thing that we really had. And so tatau is like a door. So tatau pounamu, the greenstone door, that's, you know, really is the metaphor for an unbreakable peace, a peace that when forged is so solid, smooth, and forever. And so tatau pounamu was our custom for when puhi or high-ranking chieftainesses would be given in marriage to former opponents and former enemies that were also of, you know, the same mana, the same spiritual level, I suppose, and power. And this would establish, again, alliances and a permanent peace. And then the final two customs and practices that I looked at were our belief in te whare tangata, which pretty much is, it means the house of humanity, that women are the house of humanity. And so therefore, there are many examples of when female leaders were, you know, their mana, their spiritual power was so potent that just their presence alone was able to stop war in its tracks or protect their tribe. And my final custom that I looked at is one very close to my heart, and this is Tariao, which is the peaceful religion that I referred to earlier in our kōrero, called the Morning Star. And this is, you know, a very important stronghold for our tribe to uphold our values and our history of resistance. And the sacred rites were conducted through mana wāhine, through the power of woman. Again, my great-grandmother being one of those ones who, you know, carried out her role as a high priestess, reciting all of our incantations and prayers. So that was the practices that I covered in my piece. And for me, it was like very important, obviously for a multitude of reasons, but the main two I would say was first, as a proud wāhine moi wāhine, as a Māori lesbian, to again affirm that wāhine upheld our rangatiratanga for, yet again, 27 generations. And secondly, to show, I guess, the emotional intelligence of these practices and the spiritual potency as further proof against the really harmful imperialist myths that are still really perpetuated in our country today, like the warrior gene theory, which, you know, pretty much shows us to be savages with no feelings, no benevolence, no vulnerability, no intelligence. And so I really, it's very important and a really powerful form of asserting our tino rangatiratanga or our, you know, sovereignty by observing these practices to inform how we go forward into the future. Like, you know, to observe that we have been so beautifully and firmly grounded in our Māori feminist beliefs and matriarchal knowledge, and that a huge threat to our Māoritanga and to our well-being is, of course, the misogyny that is being perpetuated under colonization, which, of course, does not respect the divine feminine and the authority of women and the spiritual power and importance of women. That's even more of a reason why it is so valuable and so beautiful, and actually such like a political action, I suppose, to look at these practices to inform our future and our well-being as an act of survivance as well, especially for our young women.
I think it's absolutely brilliant and beautiful and bold in so many ways. And it also, people do forget. I mean, before Gandhi was doing his satyagraha and nonviolent movements, Maori had been doing it for centuries earlier on peaceful resistance, challenging the land wars and the campaigns. And I remember one story where the poles that would then demarcate lands would be pulled out and seeds would be grown. But then it would also be when Maori would try to explain to the Pakeha that you can't own land. Actually, you take care of the land and the land takes care of you. So there's so many important aspects. And I think that's what was so appreciated by the people at the Permanent Forum, because you're definitely emerging scholar, but you're also an archivist, and you're serving as ambassador for Oceania in the Indigenous Youth Storytellers Circle. Can you share a bit about why storytelling is so important in self-determination struggles?
Sure, yes. Well, for starters, I feel like it is important to acknowledge that storytelling is what we have always practiced. It's just, an āhuatanga, a beautiful aspect central to our indigeneity. And we as Māori have practiced this, since the beginning of time, whether, we share our pūrako or our stories through the recitation of our whakapapa, or through types of compositions, like ori, which are our traditional lullabies that would be recited over baby in the womb, recalling their rich genealogy and lineage. And then, of course, when they did come into Te Ao Marama, when they were birthed, then it would be recited to them to enable them to learn, or whether it was through compositions of haka, like the ngiri or the haka kai ora. These were like incredibly healthy ways that our ancestors expressed themselves, but also gave permanence to knowledge, whether positive or negative, recalled genocides, recalled traumas, also recalled love and, incredibly important events, important peoples. And these were able to be, entrusted to generations through this medium of songwriting as storytelling. So I guess in being the ambassador for Oceania and the Indigenous Youth Storytellers Circle, I feel like I'm just, again, more just doing what we've done for so long. But the difference being that, first of all, the Indigenous Youth Storytellers Circle was established as an official project of the United Nations International Year of Indigenous Languages. And so it's very, very important, I think, with the many platforms that do exist, acknowledging the lack of platforms that are safe because they're by us, for us, like by Indigenous folks or by Māori for Māori. And so that is what I really love about being able to be in this position, is encouraging my people from Oceania to want to share and platform their pūrako, their stories, with the understanding that there's so many of us who can benefit from that and who want to be encouraged by stories of survivance. And to be able to do that in a really safe and amazing environment is so fabulous. So yes, I absolutely love the whole idea of the Indigenous Youth Storytellers Circle, and I love how many folks have connected to my work through it, and hopefully many more will continue to submit their stories. If anyone is listening or watching and you would like to do that, you know, you can submit poems or photo essays or videos, anything. It's you know, again, enacting our ancestral responsibilities to pass on our knowledge to benefit our peoples and other peoples as well, knowing that our struggles, but also our triumphs, are very much shared.
And definitely, I would say you're a transformative talent in the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. It's the 25th anniversary, of course, and you served as a fellow for the UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples, representing so well your tupuna and iwi. And your interventions, I know, also really touched the hearts of many people. Could you share a bit about what the essence of what you're trying to express during those couple of interventions and how people stood in solidarity with you? I think because it did resonate so much, and you're really sharing a culture of kuleana, of responsibility, emanated so well that many other people wanted to be part of that and could understand exactly where you're coming from.
Well, kia rewa. Thank you so much. Yes, it was very moving to feel that sense of solidarity, and again, yeah, that very real support, like physically as well, you know, as seen by the whanaunga from Hawaii who were literally standing guarding on either side. It was very beautiful, especially knowing that we're so underrepresented in UN mechanisms, in these global mechanisms, and it was really profound for my community and for my whānau to find out when I was accepted as, you know, a grantee for the voluntary fund this year, and to be able to be supported to go and, you know, freely and passionately send our concerns, you know, to the world. Yeah, it really is a huge responsibility, but also a huge honor. And so when I was there, I undertook 2 interventions. My first intervention was regarding agenda item 5D, and so this was with special attention to the CEDAW General Recommendation number 39 on the rights of Indigenous women and girls. And so, of course, it was very important for me with this intervention to specifically give examples of where the government has, you know, really breached our rights as wāhine and tamariki. And so one of the most pertinent was their abandoning of incarceration reduction targets, because as reflected through many Indigenous populations around the world under colonial rule, our people are so overrepresented anyhow. But with the incarceration reduction targets being abandoned, it's just getting higher and higher. As it stands, our wāhine Māori are already 63% of inmates, but only 8% of the general population. And also the government removed the responsibility of oranga tamariki, the Ministry for Children, to work with our tribes and Māori communities, which is appalling because, of course, we're already facing discrimination and disconnection as a result of the ongoing colonial establishment, to remove the responsibility of the Ministry for Children to work with our communities means that our protections for our babies and our future generations to know their identity are being quashed. And this is just going to further disconnect our people who are already languishing within these colonial systems. And then the final point, which I really wanted to highlight, were the disproportionate statistics against, again, our women, children, and youths in terms of suicide and intimate spouse abuse as well. And the fact that though the statistics are already alarming, that this isn't, there'll be still, even within these statistics, like a large underreporting because of our community's distrust in the police and fear of course, having our children uplifted if we say anything because of the institutional racism. So it was really important for me to speak on that. So that was my first intervention. And then my second one was on, I suppose, the general human rights breaches by the government, and that was really around the removal of our language from the education systems, the harshest punishments that have been given in history to our Māori parliamentarians, and removing the Te Tiriti protections, of course, from the legislation as well. So it was definitely an incredibly, kind of quite a, it came with a lot of historical trauma, of course, even recalling these difficulties, but also it came with a lot of empowerment, I suppose, and just feeling like I've came from the other side of the world. I'm not going to be threatened. I'm going to be unapologetically Māori, and just speak with the strength of my tupuna, and of course with the heartiness of my nannies, to let the world know what's happening at home, and for our people at home to feel like we don't just exist in a vacuum, but we can be heard, and we deserve to be heard, and we will continue doing what we have always done, which is, of course, asking for better and protecting our future generations. So that really was the crux of what I did there. And it was such a blessing to be able to be, fellow of the Voluntary Fund now, because without them, I wouldn't have been able to go over there. It's just so hard logistically and financially as well. That's also why we're so underrepresented, because it's really hard to just leave your communities from the bottom of the world, even though it's necessary, And
it's that solidarity, being able to listen to each other in that space. And then, as you said, people just standing with you. You had the people of Maui who had experienced the Lahaina wildfires, just recognizing what you were sharing and saying that we understand what you're saying as well. And what's good is that the Permanent Forum isn't the only space you'll be at. I know you'll be performing at Sled Island in Calgary, as well as Ness Creek in Saskatoon, and excitingly enough, even headlining the Great Northern Arts Festival in Inuvik. Maybe you could share a bit, because, we haven't even got into this side, and it maybe could be a whole other show, and I appreciate you spending all of your time, but your songs from your debut album that you're doing, called Girl in a Savage World. Maybe you could share a bit about that and the workshops you're doing on bilingual songwriting as well for Indigenous survivance and resilience.
Sure, yes. So yeah, I suppose this is the part of my life where I'm enacting that artivism from my great-grandmother, where we're able to really make change and provide super strong political messaging, grounded in our culture through the medium of song. And so when I'm not studying or researching or, doing my master's, I am composing songs. I released my debut record, as you said, Girl in a Savage World, in November last year. And, the first single from the record, Bald Head, really went hand in hand with the Toitū Te Tiriti march, and was really it was amazing. It really was embraced by our leaders and helped form the soundtrack to that resistance. And now I have also seen, the fruits of releasing these songs, which has been to be welcomed by, Indigenous communities in Canada and in America, to be able to share these songs. And that's so special to me because, of course I understand that music is universal, especially Indigenous protest music. But the fact that still these songs are written from arguably a niche perspective where, they're about historical events within my tribe and within my whānau. And then even the reo Māori, or the Māori language that's within it, is still within Te Mito Waikato, within my tribal dialect. And so to have this embraced in Turtle Island and in North America by other communities is so special. So yes, I start off by going to Calgary and performing at Sled Island. I've enjoyed, going to Calgary over the years for the folk festival and various things like that. And I think the cool thing about being more of an alt folk artist is that, yes, it is very niche, but the places where you are invited to perform are so carefully and thoughtfully curated that they're only going to be booking artists that they really trust that the audience is going to welcome. And so I do feel a sense of safety when I am going to these festivals or these communities, because I understand that it's very intentional, that they're welcoming me. And I don't really, I don't feel like there'll be too much of a resistance to my messaging, which is really lovely. People in general are very open-minded, regardless of whether they're Indigenous or not. And they generally do just want to do better and be educated and find ways to stand alongside us in our journeys. So that's Calgary. And then, then I head off to the Great Northern Arts Festival in Inuvik, in the gateway to the Arctic Circle, the Western Arctic Circle. And so there, as you said, I'm headlining the festival, but also been invited to teach a workshop. And so I decided that a very important workshop that I would be able to offer would be the beauty of and importance of bilingual songwriting, as, of course, an Indigenous woman and an Indigenous lesbian, for the purposes of resistance and resilience. And also I was invited to be on a panel about cultural appropriation versus appreciation, which I think is a really important subject to speak about. So I'm looking forward to citing the UNDRIP on that one. And then I head to Saskatoon to perform at Nest Creek, and then a brand new festival that I've just been invited to, which I'm very excited about, is called Active Passive, and this is like a very unique festival on Galliano Island off the coast of Vancouver. And so all of these places I'm really looking forward to going and being able to share these waiata and being able to share my culture, my language, and, you know, being upfront about the struggles that we're facing. But again, also the ever-present hope that we have and strength that we have in our solidarity as a community and as a people.
Well, mahalo nui loa. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. And I know there'll be many more interventions in international human rights fora, as well as more stories of survivance and songs as well going forward. And we definitely welcome you in Hawaii on your way back anytime as you return from Turtle Island. We'd love to host you here at Kamakakua Center for Hawaiian Studies or in other spaces. But mahalo, and thank you so much for coming and taking time out of a very busy schedule to share with us a bit about what inspires you and how we can all be involved with human rights around our world. Thank you again.
Nōku te whiwhi, ngā manaakitanga ki a koutou katoa. Many blessings to you all.